One of the most common mistakes made by organizations is that they try to motivate everybody the same way. So everybody's motivated by money. But in fact, that is not true.
Better look out now, though. Dave's got something for you. Tell you what it is. I'm your ice cream man. Stop me when
Today,
passing by.
in very short order, we are going to cover one of the hottest topics in the talent management world, and that is talent retention. I mean, obviously, we got to hire the right person the first time, but we also have to retain the talent that we need to deliver our strategy, to deliver our differentiation, our mint chocolate chip, and most importantly, to serve our customers. And so today, we're going to talk about and reveal and give you the tools and the knowledge and the process on that one secret for talent retention by providing you the 4 steps to guarantee employee engagement. High employee engagement leads to retention. And so we're going to provide you the tools and the processes to deliver that in your organization today. Recently, I found a Gallup poll, a Gallup study that determined that 53% of all employees are disengaged. I mean, think about that number, 53%. So right now, I'd like you to think about your direct reports, the people that you're responsible for. Think about each of them. Are they engaged? Are they, fired up about coming to work every day? 1 in 2 of all team members are disengaged. And so if that stat holds true for your team, as you visualize your direct reports, 1 in 2 of those are not engaged in their work. And the number one sign of low engagement and probably leading to losing that employee is lower productivity. So if you're seeing lower productivity, disengagement, showing up late, leaving early, if you're seeing some of those signs of disengagement, then you want to obviously take action on that, and we're going to give you the tools to do that today. So the number one secret to engaging your employees and thus retaining your employees is feeding their force. It's feeding their primary motivators in the workplace. There are 6 primary motivators in the workplace. For example, the number one motivator in the workplace is knowledge or learning. So if you have an intellectual driving force, as we call it, you are motivated to learn. And as long as you are getting the opportunity to learn, you are going to be engaged. You are going to be retained. If you have a direct report that has a high intellectual driving force, if you continue to give them the opportunity to learn, read books, go to conferences, have development plans, you are going to retain that team member. So the simple secret to engagement and retention is feeding their primary motivators. It's feeding their why. Why do they come to work? Another driving force is what we call the resourceful driving force, and that's a person that's driven by financial security, by return on their time, their talent, and their resources. And so how do you feed a high resourceful driving force? You put them on a pay-for-performance plan. You match their 401k. You give them the opportunity to feed that force. Now, I'm not going to dive into each of the driving forces today. In our material, there'll be a link for you to watch a video by me on explaining the 6 motivators in the workplace. And on each end of the motivator is what we call a driving force. So for example, we talked about knowledge being a motivator in the workplace. On one end of the continuum, you have the intellectual that's motivated by knowledge, motivated to learn, motivated to discover the truth. And on the other end of that continuum of knowledge, you have the instinctive. And they're motivated by knowledge in the workplace, but they're motivated differently. The instinctive is motivated to get the knowledge that they need for the specific project or problem that they're working on. And then once they get through that problem or solve that problem or complete the project, they're moving on. They're not gonna read the rest of the book. They're gonna read the chapter that they need. So that just shows you that there's 6 motivators in the workplace: knowledge, utility, how you serve others, advancement, methodologies, and the motivation of the work environment. So those are the 6 motivators, and on each end of those motivators is a driving force. So you have 6 motivators and you have 12 driving forces. And so the way that you retain people is to understand and engage and feed their driving forces. And so that's what we're going to cover real quickly here today and provide you a ton of knowledge to do that. So how do you guarantee employee engagement? What's the first step to employee engagement? The first step to employee engagement is really for you to understand your driving forces. What motivates you at work? What drives you? Because before we can lead others, we must first lead self. And so I clearly understand my motivators. I took an assessment about 15 years ago. It's called the Driving Forces Assessment. And it clearly communicated and helped me understand my motivators. One of my top motivators is the intentional driving force, which is my motivation to help others, but for a specific intention, a specific reason. And my reason is my intention in helping others is I want to help leaders accomplish their professional and their personal goals. And every day when I do leadership coaching or do a team development exercise or do a strategy and talent session, I am feeding that intentional motivator. I'm fired up when I get up in the morning to come to work because my motivator is getting fed. And that same principle applies to you. So you must first define how you are motivated and make sure that you understand your motivators. And you can do that a couple different ways. Number one, obviously, if you want to take a driving forces assessment, contact us at info@stopthevanilla.com and we'll help make that happen. Also in the link below or in the content for this podcast, there will be a link for a tool called the Driving Forces Identifier. And that explains the 6 motivators and the 12 driving forces. And if you share that document or if you review that document for yourself, as you're reading each of the driving forces, which 2 jump out to you as, that motivates me or that's me. It's really easy to identify your driving forces. Obviously, a behavioral science assessment is going to identify them for you. It's going to tell you the level of passion you have in each of those motivators. There's a bunch of content. There's about 20 pages in the report that gives you a bunch of information about your driving forces. But if you don't want to take the assessment, you clearly can identify your driving forces through the Driving Forces Identifier. So the first step in employee engagement is first understanding your motivators and leading self before you can lead others. The next step number 2, is really what are your forces being fed? Are your driving forces being fed at work? Are you feeding the force? So are you motivated? Are you engaged? Are you likely to be retained? And so understand what your top 2 driving forces are and make sure that you take action to feed those driving forces. Because again, before we can help others, we got to make sure that, like in an airplane when they tell you, hey, put your oxygen mask on first before you help those with you. That's the same true here. We got to make sure that we understand your driving forces and that your driving forces are being fed. So that's step 1 is understanding. Step 2 is making sure that your driving forces are being fed. Step 3 then really, once you understand what motivates you, once you've taken action to make sure your driving forces are being fed, now it's looking into your direct reports, the people that you are responsible for. And candidly, this applies to both at work and at home. Everybody around you, everybody you're responsible for has these motivators at some level. And understanding what motivators they have and to what level they're motivated by them, the passion or the energy that they have in each of those driving forces is incredibly important. So the next step number 3 to employee engagement and retention is to understand the driving forces of the people that you're responsible for. And again, you can use a driving forces assessment, which will accurately define their 12 driving forces in order and the level of passion that they each have. Or you can use the driving forces identifier that we're providing you to have that discussion with each of your direct reports. And one thing you'll notice as you're having those discussions is that each of your team members is motivated differently. One of the most common mistakes made by organizations is that they try to motivate everybody the same way. So everybody's motivated by money. But in fact, that is not true. Matter of fact, money and the resourceful driving force is like the 4th motivator Number one is to learn. So the first mistake and error that many organizations make is we try to motivate everybody the same way. And you'll motivate some people in your organization, but you're going to leave other people behind. And that's when you get turnover. You get people leaving the organization because their driving forces are not being fed. So identify the driving forces of each of your direct reports and the people that you're responsible for. And if you have kids at home and you want to help them feed the force, help go through the driving forces identifier, have them take an assessment and understand what their driving forces are. And the fourth and final step to engaging your employees and retaining your employees and the people you're responsible for is, once you understand their driving forces, how do you feed them? And putting action plans in place to feed their force. So I talked about the intellectual motivator or driving force. I talked about the resourceful driving force, the intentional driving force. There's another driving force called the commanding driving force. And this is an individual that is motivated to get ahead in the world, to win, to succeed. And so how do you motivate a commanding driving force? You show them the path. You show them the career path to accomplish success, to win. And you will motivate them. You will retain them by putting together a career path. So step 3 is understanding the driving forces of each of your direct reports. Step 4 is now feeding those forces. And one thing to note is that the driving forces can change. They usually change gradually over years and years of time. So, an employee's driving forces will be somewhat the same over 2 or 3 year time frame, unless there's a significant change of event in their life. Like they win a lottery, that might change their driving forces. What are chances of that, right? They add a child to their family, right? That might up the intensity in a motivator. They actually become empty nesters. So your motivators can change based on your life circumstances, but they usually change gradually over time. So we talk about maybe updating your driving forces assessment or understanding or evaluating your driving forces every 3 years to make sure you are feeding the force. And so that is how you increase engagement. That is the one secret to talent retention. I get called into organizations all the time that have high turnover. And we see some of the common mistakes of trying to motivate everyone the same way, not understanding people's individual motivators, not feeding their forces. And I can just guarantee you, based on the team we have here at STV Advisors and Stop the Vanilla, we're all motivated differently, and we have to make sure that we feed the force of each individual and retain them. The one secret to talent retention and engagement is feeding what motivates them. It's feeding their why they come to work. And that is the most important thing to take out of our podcast today. That's the one secret. Now, to help you feed the force of those that you are responsible for, we're going to provide you several resources. Number one, there's a link for a driving forces video. So I go through and explain the 6 workplace motivators. I explain the 12 driving forces and really help you understand the behavioral science. And some of those driving forces will jump off the page because those are the driving forces that you're motivated by. We're also going to provide you the driving forces identifier, which is a 1-page document that helps you talk through the driving forces with a direct report with those you're responsible for, and helps you identify their top 2 driving forces. And then you can put a development plan in place that feeds those forces. We also recently launched a Strategy and Talent newsletter that covered the driving forces in it, so we'll make that available to you. And last, if you would like to take a driving forces assessment, please email us at info@stopthevanilla.com. One other resource we have and we offer consistently, actually it's our most popular training program, and it's called Shepherding the Talent. It's about becoming a shepherd of the talent. A shepherd of the talent nurtures, cares for, develops, holds accountable those people they're responsible for at work and at home. And leaders have just grabbed onto this concept of shepherding the talent in their organization, and just every year they up the talent in their organization, and they're having incredible success because they are shepherding the talent. They are developing and making sure they make the right hires. They're implementing behavioral science, and a talent management process across their organization. Incredibly powerful, and we'd love to have you join us. You can go to stopthevanilla.com to understand more about Shepherd of the Talent training. On our resources page, you'll find a ton of resources to help you optimize the strategy and talent in your organization. Our objective is to help you stop the vanilla and achieve what you want in your business, your career, and your life by having the right plan implemented with the right talent. I look forward to being with you again soon here at the Stop the Vanilla podcast. Have a profitable day.
I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by. Oh my, I'm your ice cream man, stop me when I'm passing by.